In your plan, the U.S. should acquire 5 to 25% of the total Bitcoin supply by 2035 to generate between $16 to $81 trillion by 2045. I'm wondering, what has been the reception of your plan at the White House by U.S. President Donald Trump? And I'd like to hear you talk about why this is a national security issue.
I think the last 2 weeks have been extraordinary for Bitcoin and for the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve because momentum is really building. 2 weeks ago, there were three priorities, or there were three things talked about in the digital assets universe. A stablecoin act, right? The Genius bill, and a bill to create stable coins and issue them in the U.S. And that really addresses the digital currency asset class. And then there's discussion of a market structure bill, and that's to create an entire digital assets framework, presumably to issue something akin to digital tokens or tokenized securities, digital securities. And then there is the Strategic Bitcoin Bill, or the Bitcoin Act. That was the third priority. And it was a question mark of where that was in DC. There was support, but people were wondering. What happened in the past 2 weeks is the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve got elevated to a primary, if not the primary priority, with the executive order. So the president created it. And I think there are some very important things that happened. On Thursday night, about a week ago, the president issued the executive order creating the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. And in the executive order designated just Bitcoin to go in the reserve, said we should never, ever sell it. Don't sell the Bitcoin. And then directed the Secretary of Commerce and Treasury to look for budget neutral ways to acquire more Bitcoin. That was the strongest endorsement of any asset, I don't know, in 100 years, I think, by a president of the United States. You could imagine if the president has said, I'm directing the government to acquire silver and never sell it, and I want to buy more silver, or pick any asset, it would have been an extraordinary announcement. I think that was followed up by the Digital Assets Summit. And in the Digital Assets Summit, the president reiterated those points, and the Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of Commerce and Small Business Administration all were present and reiterated their support. That actually was quite amazing, along with all of the industry leaders being in one place at one time, and of uniform mind. I think Friday night, after that summit, I think the most important thing said in this industry in 4 years was said Friday night, and I think it missed a lot of people's attention. I don't think people really realize what happened. David Sachs, the crypto czar, went on the All In podcast, and on the All In podcast, he said unequivocally that the U.S. government only recognizes one crypto asset as being decentralized. So what Sachs said was Bitcoin is a decentralized asset, a store of value. That's why it's in the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. It's the only one. And so what you had was a member of cabinet responsible for digital assets policy, in essence providing very clear guidance that Bitcoin is a digital commodity, an asset without an issuer. And that's the policy of the United States and the President of the United States. And I think for 4 years, Gary Gensler at the SEC implied that, in 100 different ways, implied that Bitcoin is a commodity and nothing else is. But he implied it in a fairly obscure fashion that was kind of not very constructive, because he implied it by suing everybody else. What you had here was a different administration articulating it, but in a constructive fashion, because what Sachs said is Bitcoin is the asset without the issuer. If there are other crypto assets in the future that prove to be decentralized, we will consider them when the time comes. So we're not dismissing the possibility there would be another commodity, but right now we recognize one, and our agenda is to provide a legitimate framework to issue digital currencies, digital tokens, and digital securities. And of course, the president directed that should come to his desk by August. He said, I want to see it by August. He's actually said in the first executive order, he said within 6 months, so by late July. But basically,
well, under that requirement that there is no issuer, I don't think any cryptocurrency would really qualify. Is that your estimation?
No, one does.
Oh, except Bitcoin.
Bitcoin qualifies.
But any other ones?
Well, that's been the debate for a decade, right? And it's been a massive debate and a massive source of confusion, which is, are there other digital commodities? And the position of the previous administration, Christine, was you're either a commodity, in which case you can trade on a crypto exchange legitimately, or you're a security, in which case it's illegal, we're going to sue you, shut you down, or jail you. You see, so we had a false dichotomy, and in that world where you're either going to die, the best case is economic death, and you're blocked from the banking system. By the way, everybody's blocked from the banking system, even Bitcoin.
Sorry. So Michael, if I'm understanding this, you don't think any other cryptocurrency qualifies to be in a strategic reserve in the United States other than Bitcoin because of its decentralization and it has no issuer?
I think there's only one universally acknowledged digital commodity in the world.
Okay.
Right? There's only one. There's Bitcoin. I've said that, right? There is no second best. I've implied that and said that, and I've spent $33 billion based on that. So yeah, it was my view 4.5 years ago. There's one digital commodity. But Christine, there's a more important point here. Even if there was a second, third, and fourth, like let's take the fork wars, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. Even if you fork Bitcoin and you maintain that's a commodity, they're all going to zero if the use case is store of value or cap or money, right? Because if you were to fork Bitcoin and claim it's decentralized, the free market is going to pick the strongest network and it's going to be monetized and everything else is going to zero. So it doesn't matter from a practical point of view. My position is not that you couldn't theoretically create another digital commodity. For example, if China forked Bitcoin and declared China coin, and then said it's legal to mine China coin and it's tax-free to hold China coin and you can bank China coin in China, in theory, the power of a nation state could create digital property in China. Just like for example, I acknowledge that real estate in China is an asset without an issuer. I just don't want to own it, right? Like an American doesn't want to own Chinese real estate. An American wouldn't want to own China coin. But in theory, if you understand the economic theory of a crypto commodity, you could create it. It's just very unlikely at this point you can ever create a global money that's a crypto commodity because Bitcoin has $1 trillion of smart money behind it. And the next best thing doesn't have even 1%. I mean, less than 1% of that.